got a guest.
Bryan Curtis, Fort Worth, Texas. Bryan Curtis is the editor-at-large for The Ringer, a title even he doesn't understand. He's the second most famous sports writer to attend Pascal High School. He's the foremost authority on radio row pitches for CBD, male enhancement products, and Carrot Top. Co-host of the Press Box Podcast, Bryan Curtis.
Wow.
Here he is, folks.
Wow.
Ladies.
Bryan?
Hello, The Ringer's Bryan Curtis. Thanks for joining us.
That was amazing. You really made it when you have your own intro on the show.
Sure.
I mean, this is something else.
First guest.
Go to the mailbox and look for I've got my own intro check.
Yeah. Well, so much to talk about, Bryan.
Oh, let's do it.
It's been quite an eventful.
All right, before we get into all like the media stuff, because Bryan, that's his bit.
Uh-huh.
The Press Box. They do cover the media, and it's a great podcast. Tell us about this movie career. Bryan's in a movie.
I am in a movie. I get this note from a Press Box listener, and they say, "Hey, I made a movie. I'm a young actor and screenwriter, and there's a part in the movie, a very small part, but there's a part in the movie for a radio disc jockey who is talking to people as the world is about to end because asteroids are hitting the Earth. And this is kind of, this is like a love story. This is not a Bruce Willis goes to the asteroid and starts drilling it with Steve Buscemi kind of movie.
I mean, listen, you don't want to touch perfection."
That's right. You don't want to try to repeat what works. So I say, well, yes, I would love to be in your asteroid movie. And I went and spent a day recording in a Hollywood, sound facility. And they had filmed the movie. So they're running footage of the movie. And then I'm talking to match. And I kind of do my Press Box voice, but give it a little FM DJ. Hey, everybody, voice to it. The asteroids are coming. We're taking your calls. Open lines. Here we go. And the movie is called When I'm Ready, and it comes out in January.
You have a SAG card now?
That has not been offered to me as of yet.
Okay.
Did you get paid scale?
How was craft services?
Yeah, it was. I've not experienced any of the terms you mentioned.
It's the only ones we know.
There was a discussion about what to call the DJ, and we settled on Bryan Benson.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
And my only writer in my contract was that Bryan had to be spelled with a Y.
There you go.
That's how you know if you're a real fan. One more thing, you always ask for this: points on the back end.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
I don't know.
Also not in the contract that I didn't read terribly closely.
Yeah.
So, let's just catch up on all these stories. What the hell happened with Zach Lowe?
Dude, that was a terrible story, wasn't it? I mean, I feel like we have a lot of ESPN stories where you have the whole list. You're like, oh my God, they got rid of Jeff Van Gundy. And then for some reason, and I don't know if it's just coming at the end of a bunch of layoff stories, but it's like they got rid of Zach Lowe. What did Zach do wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I heard you and David talking about it, and it is just such a weird position that ESPN finds themselves. I feel like they've been in an identity crisis for 20 years now, and they've managed it pretty well by being able to. It's like they're almost nailing at times the give the people what they think they want, and also give the people what you want them to want information dissemination model. Because hey, here's Grantland. Grantland's going to be really thoughtful, and it's going to have long form stuff, and then, hey, we'll have podcasts that are not the same Screamin' A podcast. We're still going to pay Screamin' A and Skip Once Upon a Time and McAfee millions and millions of dollars, but we're also going to have Bontemps and Zach Lowe and Bill Barnwell. And now it seems like they're just like, you know what, screw it. We're just going to lean all the way into games and yelling and just be a lowest common denominator operation, which sucks because by nature, they have the ability to get and pay the best thoughtful people. Now it just seems like they're going to give up on that.
Yeah, and I think part of what we're reacting to here, why this seems so particularly sucky, is because ESPN used to be a box store of sports content. I mean, I was just like looking at the list of people that work there and everybody that, you mentioned. And then you've got like Wesley Morris, who is a critic at the New York Times, worked at ESPN. You talk like somebody the other day was like, hey, you forgot like Tarico on your list, not to mention my boss, Russillo, like all these guys. And you're like, I can't believe how much talent has walked out of that place over the last decade. Like, it's unbelievable. Nate Silver, who we're reading his election predictions right now every day, he worked at ESPN when I was there at Grantland. What? And so in a way, old ESPN, you didn't have to make a choice. You could be like, hey, here's a guy doing some shtick on TV. I don't like it, and I'm just going to kind of ignore it because here's Zach, here's Barnwell, here's Mina, here's all these people I like. The latter list has gotten much smaller. Way, way, way smaller. And it's what you said, Jake. It's like just they're doing something different now that's not the old ESPN.
And I noticed something, too, over the last month where I was limited to exclusively getting my sports information from ESPN. I think there's like a McAfee-ification of the entire network. And what I mean by that is I started to notice I don't know what the guys' last names are, but they do SportsCenter in the mornings on the weekend, and then they do it sometimes during the week. Their names are Gary and Randy. They're very talented, but they're very bro. I mean, I've heard them shorten words that I did not know could get shorter. And so I consumed a lot of their product, and I thought, boy, and these guys they're my age or older, but it's clear that they're trying to appeal to a TikTok-type crowd. And then the other thing I noticed is they'll have crosstalk between TV shows now like they're a sports talk radio station. So when they're wrapping up the Sports Center, let's say 7 o'clock Central Sports Center, their last block, they'll bring Greeny on. But it seems really forced because it's not the ticket, It's not even, any of these other legacy sports stations where they all know each other. I'm sure they know each other, but they're trying to do that. At the end of Sports Center, the two anchors who are presenting the top plays, they leave about 4 or 5 minutes to argue about the order of the top plays. And I'm like, you made the order. Why did we leave 5 minutes for you to be like, this should have been 6, not 3? It's like, who else made it? But it's clear that they're trying to turn it into more of that than it's ever been before. And it's weird to me.
It's funny. Like there was a while where Stephen A was going on Get Up and kind of doing a Why Today Doesn't Suck 5 to 10 minutes right at the end of the show. There was always like he's warming up, like, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, hey, your show is about to start after ours. Which did feel very sports radio. It's funny. I don't want to just be like old guy with ESPN, but I just remember like, Keith Olbermann doing an intro. Remember when they used to do those like minute and a half intros before a highlight package? And he'd be talking about the Cleveland Spiders. And I'd be, as a kid, just be like, I don't know what the Cleveland Spiders are. Oh, wait, they were an old baseball team that set some record that got broken today. It just feels like, again, the Broy stuff can be fun, but it just feels like you couldn't do that today. I mean, maybe Van Pelt is kind of working in that palette a little bit, but you just couldn't go there today. Like, that's just not ESPN anymore. And I agree. It's much, much more McAfee than anything else.
Does it also have the feel, since you've been watching a lot, of, you ever get guys talking bro, but they seem too old to be doing that? And
it's not, and it doesn't feel ironic, which, of course, would go back to something I say all the time, which is that in pop culture, the concept of irony is basically dead. Everybody's doing some sort of bit or not at the same time. But yes, they are. It does feel like they're a little out of the demo to be. I don't think AJ Hawk should be saying what are Arch Manning's dims. That feels weird to me. He's my age or older. But the other McAfee thing that I noticed was I didn't realize. I knew they would let them say words like shit or hell or damn, but they do miss some F-bombs. And it's shocking when they do to me still. It's 12:05 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and, they had Marshawn Lynch on, and half the interview was dumped. But occasionally they'll miss those, and I don't know. They literally just let him do whatever he wants. It's crazy. I don't know.
Jake, You're a game day guy. Have you enjoyed the over laughing for every time Nick Saban makes a joke?
Every time, every single time, and it's anything he says. Heck,
Yeah.
last week, do you know who the guest picker was last week, or it might have been the week before, Dan?
Manziel?
No, Miss Terry.
Miss Terry, is that his wife?
Yeah. The whole show is basically Nick Saban and Pat McAfee now.
Okay. Well, that's a 2-year
It's a wild ride.
transition.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are talking about Zach Lowe and just how ESPN is changing. And then now this all ties in, I guess, because Woj leaves. We could talk about that, and they got to replace him with Shams. I mean, we've talked forever about I just don't get the Woj, rise to prominence at ESPN because I don't know that is that valuable to people getting something told to you minutes before the team was going to tell you anyway. And I think it all kind of started with the NBA draft, correct? Woj was scooping the NBA or ESPN on the NBA draft from Yahoo, and they were like, "We can't have this. Let's hire him." And now we can't scoop anyway. But it was just kind of like a pride thing. It wasn't about anything else. It wasn't about people caring. But they've elevated him so big. Shams is so big. And then Zach Lowe, who analyzes that big trade or big deal or whatever, that is not valued at all. That's kind of what I want.
Yeah.
Like, I want it the next day. Let's dive into this. Well, I could get good minds on. Okay, this guy really is the pulse of the NBA. He could tell me, what does this mean? It's kind of like ESPN saying, doesn't matter what it means. Like,
I completely agree, and it's almost like I've been meaning to call ESPN PR and it's like, can you just give me the official reason why you want insiders on your air all the time that you're paying, by the way, millions and millions of dollars to? It's not just that, those guys are going. Woj made a reported $7 million. So think of how many people you could employ to break down trades with that money. I guess it's partly that there is the pride thing, like you said. I do know that, like, when I'm watching NFL shows on Sunday mornings, the only time I pay attention is when an insider comes on, because I'm like, well, at least he'll have information and it's not like just bad analysis of the game. But, I agree. Like, every time something happens, other people confirm it like 20 seconds later. So if I had okay, I'm not going to have Shams, I'm going to have the trade confirmer who's like reasonably well sourced around the league. And 20 seconds later, he can be like, it's right. Yep, the NBA thing is true. Let's talk about it. Let's do it.
It almost feels it's like a weird arms race. Like, if one of them exists, then 10 of them have to exist, and then it's a pride thing because you don't want to be we hear about this all the time from local media, that their editor at the newspaper or the TV station, their producer, whatever, will hear someone else ask about something and ask them, like, why didn't you ask about that? Like, why weren't you on that type thing? Like, well, because I didn't think it mattered. That was a non-story to me. So if you have Woj, you have to have several other, because their organization has to feel like we're in this game too. I guess there's the one case I would make for Woj and Woj lights is that people really do like rumors. So it's not always just that this trade has been made or this move has been made. A lot of times, like a week before it happens, he'll say something that gets the people into a tizzy, gets them all riled up.
well, I mean, Shams had J.J. Redick.
Yeah.
He had J.J. Redick nailed, but that was another comedy of whatever you would call this, like just of how bad kind of ESPN is, and Woj is, I guess that leads to another thing I want to talk about is that now even these insider information posts, they're compromised. And we have to it's kind of like I got this post about Kamala. Well, who's it from? Oh, okay. Well, then obviously they were going to write that no matter what Kamala said. Or same thing with Trump. But the, Woj who works, isn't there a tie-in with CAA? the agency, and if you're a CAA guy, and then Woj is as well.
I know Schefter gets a lot of heat for that.
Yeah, and then, or did you get it from a team? And you will see how Schefter crafts the wording of something. Debo, was it Debo? No, it was Brandon Ayuk signed this contract, the same contract that was available to him 4 months ago.
Yeah.
So clearly that
was
came
an all-timer.
That came from the team, but if it said, a different way, it would have come from the agent. So I don't know.
I agree, and I see it on my beat too, which is funny. I mean, like even who was going to replace Woj, there were Woj bombs about that. There was a will Schefter do both jobs thing, which I don't think was real. There was, or at least I never heard it was real. There was a will Jeff Passan move from baseball to basketball and do it, and then it finally got to Shams. I'm like, oh my God, we're Woj bombing the Woj replacement. just so meta. But I do know, like, again, on just on the media stuff, those rumors, those pseudo Woj bombs, like, hey dude, did you guys hear Marcus Spears signed a new contract? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't his contract was ending. What? And that's like 400 retweets. And I'm just like, okay. that doesn't move my needle, but I think people have just become so conditioned to think that anything like that's news, that's change, it's different, it's a rumor, whatever it is, that they go crazy for that stuff. Always.
Have you had a chance to take a look at this WAPO Skip Bayless piece?
I saw, when we were coming on, I just saw a couple of Twitter clips from it. What do we? What's our guy doing?
It's just life afterward. I always think of when I mention Miss Terry, I think of Skip Bayless also because he's got to have the second most name-dropped wife in sports or sports media, right? We all know Ernestine.
Who? Skip Bayless?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm way too online, but it feels like
she wrote a book. I think maybe was that.
I just know he'll always, she's definitely the one filming him when he goes and throws Dak's jersey in the trash can 7 times a year.
Okay, I always wonder who's filming him.
Yeah, well, it's her.
I mean, he's no Ben.
He's the cinematographer of Skip's Instagram for sure. Yeah.
She's no Ben.
Oh, dude, I think Ernestine is lapping Ben.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like I get a lot of Ben.
Are you sure?
Content.
I don't know, man. Ben's had quite a run over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, he has come up quite a bit.
I see other sideline reporters posing with Ben and then Instagramming that.
Oh my gosh!
Wow. Yep, saw that last week.
Yeah.
They put a mic in his dumb dog face.
Okay.
Like he's give an interview on the effing first half.
He's an influencer.
It's really just like, what does Skip do now? Which is kind of a funny thing. Even maybe if you think about Norm, I think a lot of people were like, what's Norm going to do? Like, this has been his whole life. His whole life is debating and making points and, sometimes arguing. I think that's why a lot of us thought, like, he's just going to do this until he physically can't or isn't alive. And so, yeah, Skip's got a bunch of irons in the fire. I enjoyed this paragraph. His other projects include a book about his years in television that he says he couldn't write while working for a TV network. So I would expect you to have an advanced copy of that and a review. And a screenplay centered on a LeBron James-like character that he plans to shop. Asked for details on the movie, Bayless smirked and offered, quote, a lot of sex and religion.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just such a Skip Bayless Mad Lib there. Of course it's LeBron, and it's about sex and religion. I don't know.
I mean, the whole arc is unbelievable. I mean, as somebody who was listening to him on Cliff as a kid, you could absolutely project this and you could absolutely not project this, that this would go this far. I mean, you can see it now in retrospect, the curve that takes us from 6 to 8s, and stay tuned for Bob Ray Sanders to, I am ruling the world and making how many millions of dollars on cable sports, but like, it's just still astounding to me. And if we're now in the post-TV, post-Fox Skip era, my mind remains blown by everything.
So one more thing from me on ESPN, then that's all I got, is if I asked you to crystal ball this 5-10 years from now, what do you think they look like? Do you think they'll even still try to put out thoughtful podcasts? I mean, Do you think they'll try? I mean, they've got that show with Belichick and Manning on that comes on Sunday morning, but I think they're only running that because it's Belichick and Manning. You know what I mean? They were able to replace NFL matchup because it's two guys that you've heard of and love. But I don't know that they would let, for example, Barnwell do that today. It just seems like 10 years from now, it's just going to be games and yelling exclusively.
Okay, that's on the
like
show.
5 years from now,
TV.
is Mina, do they consider Mina like this is not worth it?
Well, because you say thoughtful podcast, I'm a fan of the Windhorst, who have the two Tims.
Yeah, and I wonder about stuff like that.
Yeah.
Windhorst still has like breaking news value, and McMahon
but if they were
going to
blow out
Tims, but Zach Lowe is not.
If they're going to blow out Zach Lowe,
they cannot be far off.
Why would they not say, well, maybe Zach Lowe's salary was a lot higher than Tim McMahon's.
Yeah, he's a national guy for sure, but he's on TV more. But I don't know. It's almost like
I think, and even when you talk about the thoughtful Manning thing, remember Manning is part of the star system at ESPN.
Yeah,
he just happens to do it a different way. So he's one of those 5 to 10 stars at ESPN who kind of they're giving, and basically, by the way, they're giving their whole podcasting project to Omaha. They're not really. I mean, I guess one of the things that confused me about Zach, we can talk about like, hey, there's the first take way of doing things. There's the Zach Lowe way of doing things. You can make money on a podcast that's as big as Zach Lowe's.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say that I know I'm saying this from a podcasting company, but that always just blew my mind. It's like, how was the Zach Lowe podcast not just paying for all this, paying for Zach? Then plus you get TV hits, plus you get him writing about a sport. By the way, you just paid more than $2 billion to renew.
Most of which was behind a paywall, so if you were a big Zach Lowe fan, you were going to have to pay for it. That's making money right there, which was one of the reasons I had a subscription.
Yeah, and I think probably the biggest, right? I mean, if we looked at all the reasons, maybe Barnwell because it's NFL. I'm sure he drew a bunch of eyeballs too behind there, but it's weird to me because we could say, ESPN's stripping itself down, but I also think like they're all in on the NFL and the NBA. So surely you want people around, whether it's McMahon, whether it's Zach, whether it's, whoever it is to talk about this stuff because that generates interest in the thing you just spent billions of dollars to buy.
Zach Lowe's contract situation, do you know? Do they have to pay him for another year or two, or are you privy to that? Has he called Bill Simmons for a job?
Not that I've been present for, but I can't remember what his contract situation is. I'm trying to remember what the thing is.
That's got to be the top. The top rumor is he'll be at the Ringer, right?
I believe.
Can't confirm or deny.
I believe
don't
that's
know.
The betting favorite.
Does that get listed somewhere?
Probably.
Yeah.
I know to replace Woj was. Did you want to talk about the use check thing?
Yeah, absolutely. No,
okay.
That's on my list here.
Okay.
The NFL Player Association has put out a statement on social media bringing up the topic of where interviews with players are conducted. I know you're very aware of this, Bryan, and have your opinions on it as well. This has been a thing for a while, probably since pandemic. Took media out of there, and then media came back in. But recently, it may have reared its head again because of a Grant Cohn interaction with some San Francisco 49ers. Are you familiar with Grant Cohn?
Not offhand.
Okay, he's apparently a reporter, a San Francisco reporter. I've heard him on with Ethan Strauss in the past, and that's why he's on my radar. And I'm learning this as it goes, but apparently Grant Cohn's father was somewhat of a big-time reporter or columnist back in the San Francisco area, and this stems even back to him because he was a flame-throwing columnist who would not be afraid to take on the 49ers organization as a whole. Grant Cohn seems to be following in his footsteps. He does like YouTube stuff every day. He does shorts on practice every day, and he appears to not just step in line with San Francisco 49ers.com columnists. And so he lets his opinion. Well, I think it was Kyle Juszczyk was saying, what's this guy staring at our junk or something like that. Like they were intimating this guy kind of hangs around the showers, and just that's the shade they're going to throw back at him for the hot sports opinions he throws out there. And it's just been going back and forth, and I think that's what kind of got the fire going on this recent NFLPA jumping in saying, hey, yeah, how come reporters are even in the locker room? That's a little background on that. Now, let's talk about, Bryan, how come reporters are even in the locker room, and should they be?
It's deeply weird. I think every reporter in there would tell you the same thing. The reason they're in there is just because for convenience. Like, football game ends, you have 50 plus people on each team, and you need to talk to a whole bunch of people. So how are you going to do that? Like, what's the easiest way to do that? You're either going to have them stand there in their pads, sweating outside the locker room while you go to each one of them. I was thinking of the Cowboys-Steelers game the other day. Let's say one of us was a Cowboys beat writer, and we were trying to do it alone. How many people would you want to talk to after that game? Dak, for sure, right? We got, we need an update on Marshawn Nealon, right? DeMarion Overshown showed out, so we need an update on him. You mentioned Dowdle fumbling at the goal line. We need to talk about that, right? Winning touchdown. I mean, there's so many guys to talk to do it efficiently. You do them in one place. We should also add that when the guys are in there, they are effectively cornered, right? You have to go in, you have to get changed, and then you have to come back to your locker and meet the press, right? So there is an element of that too, that this is advantageous for sports writers, because if I sit next to this guy's locker, he is going to come back and I'm going to get my 2 minutes with him, or a minute, or whatever it is. I'm going to get my question into him. I think a lot of players have said, well, we want to just replace this with something else. Now, whether they want to actually replace it or just get rid of reporters out of the locker room altogether, not totally clear to me, but they would just not like them in their business like that. Like, the locker room needs to be private, it needs to be sanctified. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, and the players have proposed, well, what if we had this other room outside where we all sat in and talked to you post game, and then we went in the locker room, you didn't follow us in? If you could be workable with that, I think, if that were to actually make sense, like 50 people plus all the media in a room, that's an extra room next to the locker room, or however you want to do it, that would make sense. But it's always funny to me, because where we used to hear this on the ticket. People used to be like, you don't need to be asking players questions right after a game. I mean, who cares about the answer they give? And then every ticker, every 20 minutes would have sound from the Cowboys locker room. I'm like, dude, you quit the post-game interviews first, and then you can complain about it.
Yeah, I know if you just said, well, we'll just put them on podiums. That's also just...
It would take forever, and it's sanitized.
Yeah.
Highly.
It's sanitized, but also it works in the NBA because there's like 4 guys right after a game you want to talk to. It's not the same in the NFL. I mean, just think about the Cowboys-Steelers example I just gave. There's a ton of dudes you want to talk to after a game.
And it was always weird to me, too, just from my one road trip covering the Cowboys. Jerry talks at the same time. Yeah. It's not like he goes to the podium like McCarthy does, or like Dak does, or like Garrett did.
So you have to choose?
Yeah, you're like, how does this work?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Wouldn't Jerry do it like in the locker room right before it opened, like outside the door, so that
yes,
the reporters are waiting to get in, and he has the captive audience?
Right, but some guys are running in there, they're getting ready, like they use Jerry as like cover almost. Like, they would try to get ready while Jerry was still talking so that they could make their way out. It's a really weird deal, especially just. I'm a progressive guy, whatever. It's still weird to have women in there. To me, it's just puts them in
just with dongs hanging out,
incredibly uncomfortable situation.
Yeah,
and I think it's uncomfortable for dudes too. But I don't know. it's a very weird thing. It's just grandfathered in, I guess, and it makes no sense.
Let's ask a question. I know no one knows the answer to this. How does the WNBA handle it? Because they clearly don't let dude reporters in there while they're changing.
So it must be a media room podium kind of thing. But
yeah,
again, it's like, it's as much, you're talking just about so many fewer people to talk to.
Yeah.
By the way, when I've traveled around, talked to sports writers elsewhere, it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Nobody else has.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, what do they do?
Well, in soccer, they walk you out to like a little room, right? It's like a little.
Well, it's a mixed zone, that's like this little, players can walk by, but players don't have to stop, is the thing.
So you cannot. All right, you're not guaranteed I could have access to anybody on the team that I want.
The leagues of the CBA here, mandate that you have to talk after the game. Now, if you don't, the penalties are pretty small for an athlete. They could we saw Marshawn Lynch years ago, right? Just sort of blow that off or make it into a gag, do a bit. but you have to talk. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, think about the CD Dak thing that NBC made such a big deal out of, and I don't think that got actually settled until Wednesday, right? If I'm not mistaken. That's what locker rooms exist for. You'd be like, hey, man, the broadcast made it seem like you were saying something about Dak on the sideline. What did you say?
So
that is literally what that is for.
So do we only think we need this because it's been the way it is?
Yeah.
So we as media feel like we're entitled to this, but actually, if this didn't exist at all from the beginning, everything would be fine, and we'd still love football and follow the teams.
I think it's a reasonable question to ask. Like, what would you lose if all this went away? Would you really, if you had, if it either went behind podiums, went to another room, you just had the Wednesday availability at the Star, like what would change? But I also know that people to host sports shows would go on there and complain, why isn't the media asking so-and-so about this? Why can't we get answers to these questions that are going to make our segments?
And fans might care about that too. I don't think that's solely media. Yeah, and it's a weird deal. Speaking of the Wednesday availability, we just played the audio and video of Dak really upset that people were making a big deal over his house being demolished to build a new one. And he was mad that there were drone shots and TMZ was there, despite the fact that he shot bits with Dude Perfect during it. So that's just too on the nose. But what's weird about it is if Troy or Chris and Tarico caught that video and were like, oh, you can decide for yourself what this is between CD and Dak, then people speculated about it, everybody, media or otherwise. The only way he was able to set the record straight on what he actually said was by meeting with the media. And in that answer, he's like, he said jump ball, obviously, but I know what you guys are going to do. You're just going to take it and run with it and create your own stories and narratives. And I guess that's what y'all do, but I don't care. When in reality, the only way he was able to set the record straight was because he has to meet with the media every week.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know.
And I saw people on Twitter at Clarence Hill during the game being like, "That it's not a big deal. Trust me." And all you have to do is ask right after the game, like, "What did you say?" Okay, great.
Yeah.
Jump ball next time. Let me go get it.
Yeah, it's a weird. And then if the teams are saying they don't need to be asking questions to everybody that exists and all this kind of stuff, and I'm only thinking of this is anecdotal, I suppose, but you guys have heard this before. I got a buddy who works for the Cavs. He gets mad at local media members who criticize the team, but that he never sees them at the games or in the press conferences.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, he never even comes to these games. You can't. Does that really help? I argue with him all the time about that.
Yeah, that was a Carlisle special. Oh, good to see you here for the first time in 4 months.
And Pete DeBoer with
Pete
Kalishaw.
DeBoer, for sure, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
The dance we do.
And the whole thing about, hanging out, I totally understand. Again, the whole situation is weird, but the reason people hang out in locker rooms, they want to have relationships with players, right? They want to have some kind of working relationship with them so that when a weird thing comes up, they can ask them about it. And it's not just like, hey, I'm a stranger asking you about a ball you just dropped at the end of the game. Like, we have a relationship. So, this is coming from a place where I've asked you a million questions, and asked you questions when you had the game of your life and all that stuff like that. That's what it's about, right? Is making sure that players and reporters are not strangers to each other.
Well, and
to me is like,
it's insider info.
Tell me how we do that.
Because the whole reason, like Jerry does this little scrum and everyone asks their questions, but then there's the walk-off because you want an answer that no one else has. And that's probably where this originated, is you want to ask the guy in his locker with no one else around so you have an answer that no one else does.
Totally. And that informs everything you write. I mean, again, that doesn't exist without relationships. If I walk in the Cowboys locker room and I'm like, hey, CD, tell me what's really going on, he's going to be like, who the hell are you? But if there's guys that have been in there all the time, like that's where you get that kind of stuff.
And the report that we were talking about before you joined about Zeke dumbfounded about his red zone opportunities, that came from a Clarence Hill question to Ezekiel Elliott in the locker room.
Yep. Clarence gets a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it could have also been one of those things where he's like, hey, Zeke, you're not getting a lot of opportunities in the red zone. Are you bothered by that? He's like, well, yeah, sure. I mean, okay. Zeke said, if could have been led into that.
Yeah, so but if it's at a podium and he asks the same thing, Zeke will say, no, I mean, I'm happy, whoever gets the ball. I'm just trying to be a leader here. But if it's a one-on-one, it's like, hell yeah, I don't know why they give me the damn ball.
Yeah.
He's a little more honest.
Well, we've solved a lot of media problems today, Bryan.
We have.
Good thing we're on the case. And we encourage everybody to go listen to the Press Box. It's fantastic, especially here in campaign season. Oh, can we get like a
talk.
Don't you have some kind of a button available to your big fans?
I got one right here.
A Press Box
You
campaign
too
button?
could own this special Press Box 2024 campaign button.
How can I get a hold of that one? Or not that one in particular.
Well, we don't exactly have merchandising, but I can send some to the Dragon Den. You know
Oh,
what I'm
okay, yeah. Let's do that.
It's all we're
saying?
concerned
Care
about.
package.
Yeah, I'm concerned about me.
Yep.
Here we
And
go.
the great Bryan Curtis. Thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro. Cool.
Nice hat.
What's the hat?
Albuquerque Isotopes, sir.
Okay.
That didn't help. I don't know what he just said.
Minor League Baseball.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Dan only memorizes the managers of the bigs.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
What if I showed up one day and had all of AAA?
Well, I
Don't hurt me.